This is the story of a $135 million trap, hidden in plain sight, resting on the head of a future queen. In less than 60 seconds, everything changed. When the gilded doors of Windsor Castle swung open for the Nigerian State Banquet, Queen Camilla believed she had finally secured her absolute supremacy. She was draped in the late Queen Elizabeth's Belgian sapphire tiara, expecting the room to bow to her hard-won status. But then Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped into the light. She was not just wearing a dress, she was wearing a weapon. Perched on her head was the Cambridge Lover's Knot, the very same diamond and pearl-heavy crown that had famously given Princess Diana headaches. The cameras flashed, the room went completely still, and the atmosphere shattered. According to multiple palace insiders, Camilla was later left in tears. What Camilla just realised behind closed doors is that the crown she chased for 30 years is completely hollow. This video will unpack the devastating reality of what actually happened that night. We will expose the secret power grab Camilla attempted behind the palace gates while Catherine was recovering from her battle with cancer. We will reveal how Prince William and Princess Anne uncovered the paper trail of her ambitions, and we will break down the silent, ruthless retaliation that followed. You're about to understand the precise moment Camilla was forced to face a terrifying truth. She may possess the title of queen, but she owns absolutely no real power, no property, and no enduring legacy. This is a masterclass in the weaponization of administrative protocol and the silent execution of royal revenge. To understand the sheer magnitude of this visual humiliation, you must first understand the illusion of absolute power Camilla had spent 3 decades meticulously building. For 30 years, she operated with a staggering level of strategic endurance. Her ultimate goal was never merely to marry Charles. It was the total institutional erasure of Diana's legacy and the elevation of her own bloodline. Year by year, she chipped away at public resistance. She rebranded herself from the most controversial woman in Britain to an indispensable royal asset. She believed she had Charles completely controlled, orchestrating a court where her loyalists held the keys to the kingdom. During this time, she began pushing to elevate her non-royal children, quietly integrating them into the inner sanctum of palace life, blurring the lines between the blood royal and her own family. In the months leading up to this fateful banquet, Camilla felt utterly untouchable. Catherine was stepping back from public duties to fight a severe health crisis, and William was consumed by the dual burdens of his wife's illness and his father's medical treatments. Camilla saw a vacuum and she moved to fill it. She assumed Catherine's absence was a permanent surrender. She began operating as the sole matriarch of the monarchy, commanding the resources of the crown and living in a gilded reality where every door opened at her command. She felt invincible, believing the public relations machine she had spent millions cultivating had finally rewritten history in her favor. But this illusion of power masked a deep commercial desperation. Behind the scenes, a quiet administrative war was brewing over who actually controlled the future of the monarchy. What appears to be true, based on careful observation of palace protocol, is that Camilla attempted a final quiet consolidation of influence. While the public was distracted by health updates, Camilla was allegedly maneuvering to shift key patronages and alter internal royal payrolls to favour her inner circle. She wanted to ensure that her family and her staff were permanently embedded in the royal institution, regardless of what happened to Charles. She was attempting to secure a future where she could not be evicted or sidelined by William when his time came. However, what she did not anticipate was the forensic emotional discipline of Prince William and Princess Anne. They had been watching everything. They had seen the subtle maneuvers, the shifting of staff, and the quiet attempts to rewrite the visual hierarchy of the royal family. William carrying the silent, enduring grief for his mother, and Anne, with her fierce, uncompromising protection of the crown, do not fight with leaked tabloid stories or public tantrums. They fight with institutional architecture. The turning point happened when William and Anne uncovered the administrative trail. It was not a dramatic confrontation. It was the quiet discovery of an updated protocol list, a restricted access directive, and subtle changes in how the royal estates were being managed. They uncovered the tricks Camilla was using to elevate her status and realized that a permanent line had to be drawn. They did not shout. They did not confront her in a screaming match behind closed doors. Instead, they authorized a silent, devastating counterattack. They understood that the most lethal way to destroy a public relations illusion is with an undeniable visual contradiction. And so the trap was set for the Nigerian State Banquet. Camilla had arranged the chessboard perfectly for herself. She secured the late Queen's Belgian sapphire tiara and paired it with heirloom Cartier bracelets. The visual messaging was designed to be undeniable. She wanted to project that she was the sole inheritor of Queen Elizabeth's regal authority. She expected Catherine, who had been absent from state banquets for nearly 2 years, to fade into the background, perhaps wearing a lesser piece of jewellery, quietly submitting to the new hierarchy. The administrative protocol dictated that Camilla would be in the room first, establishing her dominance before the junior royals arrived. Then, the execution took place. When Catherine, Princess of Wales, walked into St. George's Hall, every detail of her appearance was a calculated lethal strike against Camilla's supremacy. She wore a deep teal gown, a masterful sartorial nod to the Nigerian flag showcasing her flawless diplomatic supremacy, but it was the jewellery that delivered the fatal blow. The Cambridge lover's knot. Tiara is not just a collection of 19 diamond arches and dangling baroque pearls. It is a $135 million ghost. It is the exact tiara that came to define Princess Diana's royal existence. By choosing to wear it on this specific night, which also happened to be British Mother's Day, Catherine was not merely accessorizing. She was summoning the ghost of the people's princess into the very room where Camilla demanded to be worshipped. That detail matters profoundly. The lover's knot belongs to the title of the Princess of Wales. It is an institutional inheritance that bypasses Camilla entirely. While Camilla was standing there in a cobbled-together ensemble, wearing clip-on earrings because she does not even have pierced ears, Catherine was wearing the unbroken, undeniable lineage of the crown. The contrast was staggering. On one side of the room stood a woman desperately trying to wear the clothes of a monarch, projecting an illusion of power through borrowed gems. On the other side stood the effortless, undisputed future of the monarchy, carrying the weight of history and the love of a nation. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The silence was deafening. Every foreign dignitary, every photographer, and every royal insider knew exactly what they were witnessing. It was the devastating contrast of Schadenfreude, the billionaire public. Relations facade crashing into a broke reality. This was not a fashion statement. What looked like a routine administrative update to the royal dress code was actually a total dismantling of her empire. Camilla's reported tears that night were not born of simple vanity or jealousy over a better dress. They were the tears of a woman experiencing a sudden violent psychological collapse. In that glittering hall, surrounded by priceless art and global leaders, the trap finally snapped shut. Camilla realized that despite all the maneuvering, all the titles, and the decades of public relations campaigns, she had been entirely outplayed. She looked across the room and saw the devastating truth. William held the purse strings of the Duchy of Cornwall. Catherine held the hearts of the public and the immortal memory of Diana. And Camilla, the Queen Consort of the United Kingdom, realized she was entirely surrounded, utterly powerless and trapped in a cage of her own making. As panic set in and the humiliation washed over her, she turned her eyes toward King Charles, desperate for him to intervene, to assert his authority to save her from this public execution. But what happened next would break her completely. When Camilla turned her eyes toward King Charles in that glittering, suffocating hall, she was looking for a savior. She expected the man who had torn his own life apart for her. The man who had defied his mother and his nation to make her queen to finally draw a line. She needed Charles to assert his ultimate authority to pull rank on his son, and to reprimand Catherine for this breathtaking visual defiance. But as the foreign dignitaries mingled and the cameras documented the undeniable shift in the room, Charles did nothing. He offered her no reassuring glance. He made no subtle gesture of protection. Instead, he turned his attention to the Nigerian president, engaging in polite diplomatic conversation as if the silent execution of his wife's legacy was not happening right beside him. That devastating silence was the psychological climax of Camilla's 30-year campaign. In that fleeting moment, Charles chose the crown over Camilla. To understand why this betrayal cuts so deeply, we must look at the brutal pragmatism of the British monarchy. King Charles is a transitional monarch and he knows it. He is a custodian of an institution that is actively preparing for his departure. His reign is the bridge between the monumental Elizabethan era and the modernized future of William and Catherine. Charles is acutely aware that any war against his heir is a war he will inevitably lose. William holds the momentum, the public adoration, and the unblemished moral high ground. By choosing to look away, Charles was not just avoiding a family argument at a state banquet. He was offering his silent submission to the new order. He was acknowledging that he could no longer protect Camilla from the institutional reckoning that his son was carefully orchestrating. The profound tragedy of Camilla's situation is rooted in what can only be described as commercial desperation. The illusion of absolute power she projected to the world masked a terrifying financial reality. Camilla owns no sovereign wealth, she controls no ancestral estates, her entire existence within the royal framework is contingent upon her marriage. When Charles ascended the throne, the Duchy of Cornwall, a billion-dollar real estate and investment empire automatically transferred to Prince William. This means that William is effectively the landlord of the royal family. He controls the leases, the agricultural lands, the commercial properties, and the vast revenues that fund the private lives of the royals. Camilla is essentially a tenant in her own life, entirely reliant on a financial structure now controlled by a man who has spent his life quietly mourning the mother she replaced. The administrative paper trail that William and Princess Anne uncovered was Camilla's desperate attempt to bypass this financial vulnerability. What appears to be true is that she was trying to secure permanent, irrevocable funding and housing for her staff and her family, insulating them from William's future control. But William's retaliation was a masterclass in bureaucratic warfare. He did not need to issue a dramatic eviction notice. He simply declined to authorize future pensions for certain positions. He quietly reviewed the leases on properties earmarked for Camilla's inner circle, reassigning them under the guise of streamlining the estate. It was a polite, bloodless, and absolute dismantling of her security network. William used the very system Camilla thought she had mastered to remind her that she owns absolutely nothing. This is where the story shifts from the destruction of Camilla's empire to the restoration of Catherine's rightful place. When Catherine stood in St. George's Hall, wearing the Cambridge lover's knot, she was not just a princess attending a dinner, she was a cancer survivor who had walked through the fire and returned with unassailable moral authority. The public knew what she had suffered during her prolonged absence. They knew about the chemotherapy, the silent disappearance, and the grueling physical toll. Her return was a triumph of endurance. By pairing her uncomplaining sacrifice with the ultimate symbol of Diana's legacy, Catherine cemented herself as the untouchable matriarch of the future. She demonstrated that she possesses the exact emotional discipline that Camilla lacks. Catherine does not demand to be worshipped, she simply does the work, and in return, the institution protects her. The subtle shifts in royal protocol following that night further confirmed the new reality. What viewers noticed in subsequent weeks was a quiet but deliberate restructuring of visual hierarchy. Catherine began wearing more pieces directly associated with the late Queen Elizabeth, seamlessly blending Diana's emotional legacy with the late monarch's sovereign authority. Meanwhile, subtle restrictions were placed on Camilla's access. The guest lists for inner circle private events were reportedly tightened. Administrative approvals for Camilla's personal projects suddenly required additional layers of vetting by William's office. Even the portraiture in certain corridors of royal residences seemed to shift, with images of the late Queen and historical monarchs being brought out of storage to replace more recent, carefully curated photographs of Charles and Camilla. Every minor adjustment was a reminder of who actually controls the narrative. The lover's knot tiara itself carries a heavy physical symbolism that perfectly encapsulates this dynamic. The piece is notoriously difficult to wear. Its staggering weight and swinging pearls reportedly gave Princess Diana severe headaches. Yet she wore it repeatedly because it was the armor her role required. Catherine bears that same physical burden willingly, honoring William's grief and bringing a piece of his mother's memory into the present. It represents a willingness to endure pain for the sake of the crown. In stark contrast, Camilla's entire history has been about avoiding sacrifice and demanding the spoils of a position she did not earn through duty. The tiara is a mirror reflecting the difference between a woman who serves the institution and a woman who expected the institution to serve her. As the banquet concluded and the royal family retreated behind closed doors, the permanence of Camilla's defeat settled in. She realized that her legacy is inherently mortal, tied entirely to the lifespan of her husband. Once Charles is gone, her access to the palace is the royal vaults, and the balcony of Buckingham Palace will depend entirely on the mercy of King William. And William, standing shoulder to shoulder with Princess Anne, has just shown her exactly how much mercy she can expect. There will be no cruelty, no public humiliation, and no tabloid warfare. There will only be the cold, precise execution of protocol. She will be politely escorted to a side door, her access passes quietly revoked, her influence administratively erased, and her existence relegated to a footnote in the history of William's reign. The British monarchy survives because it is ultimately ruthless in its preservation of the bloodline. What looked like a routine gathering of state was actually a silent transfer of absolute power. The William and Catherine era has officially begun, built on the solid foundation of enduring duty and the immortal memory of a mother who was never allowed to be queen, but whose crown now guides the future. If this deep dive changed how you see the hidden machinery of the royal family, take a moment to subscribe and join us for more forensic analysis of the power dynamics that shape our world. The truth is always hiding in plain sight, and we are here to uncover it with you.